The brain starter asks you to write two equations that could be used to solve for x. So, I'm giving you time to do this now, so pause your video. And I will give you the answers in 3, 2, 1. The first step you need to do is label your sides properly. So from the 53, 15 is the opposite. The side we don't have is the adjacent, and the x is the hypotenuse. So since we're dealing with hypotenuse and we're dealing with opposite, obviously that means we could use sine. We could use sine of 53 equals the opposite, 15, over the hypotenuse, x. But since it asked for two equations, what other trigonometric ratio uses both opposite and hypotenuse? Well, that's the reciprocal of sine, which is cosecant. So cosecant of 53 equals the hypotenuse over the opposite, or x over 15. You could use either of these two equations to solve for x, but I'm not going to. Yesterday we found a side using trigonometry, but today we'd be looking for an angle. And the only way you can do this is if you're given two sides already. So after that, the steps are almost exactly the same, except there's one twist that we'll get to during the example problem. First, you label hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. You figure out which ratio you'd like to use. You set up an equation. And the difference is in how we solve the equation. Since sine, cosine, tangent, all of these are functions, we have to use an inverse function to cancel them out, which we'll introduce during the example. With this problem, we're given a side of 11 and a side of 26, and we're asked to find the angle. So the first step is going to be to label the sides, hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. Pause your video now so you can label those sides. Give the answer in 3, 2. From the angle theta, 26 is the opposite, and 11 is the adjacent. The hypotenuse is the side we don't necessarily need right now. The next step here is to figure out which ratio you would like to use. So pause your video again and figure out which ratio is appropriate to use. There will be a question asking you which one to use. The answer comes in 3, 2. Since you're given the opposite and the adjacent, it's best to use either tangent or cotangent. For the purpose of this, I'm going to use tangent. So we set up a proper equation. Tangent of our angle is theta, we're looking for it, equals the opposite over the adjacent. So tangent of theta equals 26 over 11. Now we're at the point where we need to solve for theta. And since tangent's a function, we need to use the inverse. The inverse of it looks like that. It's tangent with a little -1 superscript, and it's on your calculator. And you do it to both sides. On the left side, it cancels out the tangent, and on the right side, you can type that in and get a value. So essentially, theta equals, on your calculator, the inverse of tangent of 26 over 11. Using your calculator, you see that tangent or theta is about 67 degrees. If the problem asked you to find the other acute angle, what could you do? Pause your video and think about it. Since the angles of a triangle add up to 180, and the right angle is always 90 degrees, then all you have to do is do 90 minus 67 to find this acute angle. And you'll see that that angle is 23 degrees.